So hey there, Facebook world, Thomas Folden with eXp Realty here, and the Nesting Realty Group, and coming to you with, for me, an eerie type of feeling and conversation. I'm at Sunset Funeral Homes, and I'm here with Allen Borshow, who I'll introduce. Now, I met Allen through an organization we're both a part of, Business Network International. And what he does is pre-arrangement planning for funerals and things like that. And I'll let him get into it a little bit more. But I want to say that I would never have this conversation organically, because it's a little odd for me to have a conversation about death, about planning my funeral, about life insurance. Like, those types of conversations give me anxiety. And I think back to when my father passed away, and my mother was left having to try to figure everything out, and it puts me in a weird position, and it's a tough conversation. And for me, it would be a barrier to even talking to Allen. So thankful for Business Network International to put me in a position where Allen and I had a conversation, and basically it broke down that barrier for me to have this conversation. And based on that conversation is why I'm coming to you live, because if I have those feelings, I know some of you have those feelings, and the end result is that I want you to get the information and maybe break down the barrier so you can pick up the phone and call Allen and get the information that you need. So I'm gonna let Allen talk here a little bit and tell about what he's doing. Got a little presentation here behind, and we'll be able to have a question and answer portion as well. So if you send in questions, I will feed them over to Allen and let him answer it live. I'll also post this video back on Facebook a little later, and then we'll add some questions and things like that a little bit later. So here's Allen. I want to let Allen come on in. So Allen, here you go.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for allowing me to do this with you today, and hopefully in answering many of your questions and hopefully eliminating some of those fears and anxieties. Maybe I can do that for all of your followers out there as well.
Yes, sir.
It certainly will have a lot of questions and hopefully answers. So the first thing I would ask you, Thomas, is do you have any thoughts about what you want for your funeral?
Yeah, so in my family, they were basically like, everybody's getting cremated and that's it. For me, it's more, because I'm a veteran, I have this image in my head of like Arlington National Cemetery, and I did 20 years in the military. I'm a disabled veteran. I think I have a place in a military or a veteran cemetery where my family can come and visit and see me. I don't have the ability to do that for any of my family. So that's important to me.
Well, it is important. And as a veteran, first of all, thank you for your service. And for all of those veterans out there, I will share something with you that most of you all know, but some of you don't. If you don't, then this has been a worthwhile presentation. Many veterans think that their entire funeral and their interment is covered because of their service to our country. That is not correct. Only the interment is covered. The funeral, what we do here, is not covered by the military and has to be taken care of by the family. So that being said, it sounds like you're sort of up in the air about what you would like. Let me just sort of give you maybe a 7-8 minute presentation that will sort of clear up what a person, a group of people, family, loved ones have to go through when they meet the funeral director when a loved one passes, when it's at need. Wow. And there's been no prearrangement.
Wow.
First of all, the question is, do you want a traditional burial, or do you want cremation? if you want a traditional burial, do you want a wooden casket? Do you want a steel casket? Is there a particular color that the loved one might want, or you might want? What kind of flowers do you want? Do you want roses? Do you want carnations? Do you want a video tribute that celebrates your life and the life of your family? Do you want an open casket? That's a question that is very much needs to be talked about. Some people do, some people don't. Do you want a service the night before burial? Many people in this town, and I've been here all my life, 68 years, are of the Roman Catholic faith. The Roman Catholic faith, many of the traditional Roman Catholics want a rosary the night before. In many religions, they want a service the night before. So do you want that? Do you want an open casket? Some people do not. Do you want any musicians to play at the funeral? Do you want to serve a meal afterwards?
Do people, when you're saying these things, do people start to get really stressed out? Because I'm looking at all of this and I'm going, man, oh man, oh man, there's so much. I never thought about a musician or what type of flowers I could, maybe I just check from a list of stuff. And I gotta be honest, this right here is giving me anxiety that I have to plan for all of this stuff.
Well, Thomas, you're exactly right. But if you can imagine the anxiety of looking at this now, think about the anxiety that your loved ones go through when the time has come. They want to be any place else besides the funeral home. They want to be picking up family members at the airport and celebrating their life back at their home and remembering the good times instead of being down here for 2 or 3 hours and determining all this, because this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
And so if it's tough to do now, think about how tough it is to do for your family when the time comes. And believe me, pre-arrangement is a gift. It's a gift financially because it freezes the cost of something that goes up every year and you must have. But even more importantly, emotionally, because the family is going to have to go through something that is just the toughest thing in their lives to do. And they don't want to do it. You have given them that gift that they do not have to do that. Well, let's go further and say, okay, I want cremation. Well, do you want cremation with an open casket ahead of time and then cremation afterwards? Or do you want your cremains at the service and then taken to Fort Bliss or wherever? What kind of urn do you want? Do you want porcelain? Do you want marble? Do you want bronze? What do you want? All these things have to be taken care of, and a little bit about what I'm showing you here is how mixed up it all gets, and it's even more than this. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as I said. If you do this at need, these are some of the things that your family is going to have to decide on the spot. And many times, Thomas, people will underbuy because they want to keep whatever life insurance proceeds or whatever money they have for themselves rather than going to the funeral. And that doesn't accomplish what their loved one wanted. Many times people overbuy. They don't want to be embarrassed at the funeral, and so they pick out a casket that might be much more expensive than what is really needed based on the money that they have, and that causes a problem as well. So all of these things are what goes through in an at-need situation. And then the most important thing, after you've figured out all of these things, what the family wants for their loved one, then they have to pay for it.
Right.
And they have to pay for it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the deal. And you have no leeway there. When you have prearranged with me, all you have to do, the family members, is pick the date and the time. Because everything else is taken care of. So that to me is the best way to handle final expenses. I hope that I've shared some of this with you. I hope that that has given you some thoughts on some specific questions that you can ask of me. One of the things that I will tell you, and for everybody who's listening, many people say, I think it's a great idea, but I'm not going to be living here. I'm probably going to move to where my children are or grandchildren are. The pre-arrangement contract is portable.
Mm-hmm.
Because pre-arrangements are not written through the funeral home. No funeral home in the country writes their own pre-arrangement contracts. Because if the funeral home went out of business, everybody would lose their contract.
Right.
So an insurance company writes the contracts. Therefore, it's portable. Now, I do tell people, if you're going to move from El Paso, Texas to New York or San Francisco, Chicago, the base contract will be there. The family might have to put in a little extra because things cost more in those cities. Sure. But if you're going to move to San Antonio, or you're going to move to Albuquerque, or Phoenix, or Tucson, or Fargo, North Dakota, the contract will stand up and can be used anywhere in the country. Okay. My father, who passed away in 2013 at the age of 90, he bought a contract 40 years prior. And I wasn't in the business then. But what happened was, when he passed away, all I did was I called the company that had the contract, and I said, Mr. Julian Borshow, contract number 12345, has passed away. Will you please send the proceeds to Sunset Funeral Home? And 3 days later, the money was there and it was taken care of. So these contracts are portable. Mm-hmm. So I hope I've answered a few questions. I know you have some really specific ones, and I'm going to do everything I can to answer those questions for you.
So I think this is super powerful right here, because on the backside everything is so jumbled and it's dizzying, you know, to try to think about all of this stuff. And then if you do all of this when you're in a clear mind, it's easier than if I pass away, then my wife would have to do that, or my children would have to do that. And then I'm going to turn this back around, because I don't know that we hit this piece of it, but where on this sheet did it talk about, if I pass away, what do I want? If it's at need and in the moment and I'm passed away and my family is doing this has nothing to do with what I want for myself or my vision or my plan for myself. And I've never had this conversation with my wife. I'm gonna scoot in so you can get on the camera, but I've never had this conversation with my wife to say, what do I want to do? I have a vague idea, but what do I want? What do other people get? I have no idea.
I have sat in this very room, Thomas, with a family, in the most extreme example, 6 sisters were in here planning something for their mother. And the mother hadn't passed away. But what should have been a 15-minute conversation took 2 hours because the 6 sisters were fighting tooth and nail over what their mother wanted.
Right.
And it didn't have to be that way. They finally got it taken care of. But if the mother would have pre-planned ahead of time, way ahead of time, they wouldn't have had this conversation. And then I'll give you for instance, that was a real live situation with me. I had a very, very close friend, somebody that was 3 months older than I was. And he, 2.5 years ago, I get a call from a mutual friend, and he said, Alan, where are you? And I told him where I was. And he said, can you get down to Sierra Medical Center because Frank had a massive stroke and they're going to pull the plug on him in a couple of hours. And I raced down to Sierra, and as I was turning the corner and walking into ICU, I can hear 2 women arguing. And I recognized the voices. One of them was Norma, who was the ex-wife, and the other one was Claudia, who was the girlfriend, and soon she was hoping to become the next wife. And they were arguing about what they were going to do for Frank's funeral. Right. And I told them, I said, both of you know me, Norma and Claudia, you've known me for a while. Let me just put your fears at rest. Frank did a pre-arrangement contract 3 years ago after his mother passed away. And not only are his wishes all down on paper, but it's paid for. He paid for those in 3 years, and it was a couple of months ago that it was paid for in full, and that stopped all the arguing.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very wonderful gift to share, not only to a loving, cohesive family, but to a family relationship and a relationship that can be strained.
Right.
And I'd also like to read, before you maybe ask me some questions, I'd like to read to you from an article that was written in the El Paso Times by the preeminent tax attorney in El Paso, Texas, in my opinion, David Leeper. His father was a tax attorney, and he wrote an article about financial planning, and part of it touched on funerals, and if I may share this with you.
Absolutely.
Both of my parents have passed away. My brother and I handled the funeral arrangements. Even as experienced estate planning attorneys, we were both astounded by the number of choices and the possible costs for the various funeral services and burial. I would strongly urge each of you to consider meeting with the funeral home and spend a few minutes now planning our own funerals. Folks, the time, expense, and family conflict that often arises in close families from an unplanned death is generally avoidable by taking a few simple steps in advance. Do yourself and the people you love a great service now while you are alive and alert for the events that are certain to come. And remember that ex-wives can be real helpful under these circumstances. So that was from a tax and estate attorney, and I think those are words that are very helpful in these situations.
And there's 2 events that really highlight the fact that it's coming, and everybody's gonna do it. It's one thing that's very certain in life, and I have to bring it up. But the August 3rd, shooting last year, there were a bunch of people affected, and did they have something down on paper? Because tragedies do happen. And then obviously what we're experiencing now with COVID-19, where people can feel indestructible, but then something comes along and changes everything. And just the fact that we're sitting here and we have masks on our face highlights that. And there's people who thought, man, planning, what am I going to do in 10 years? I want to be retired. I want to take a vacation. I want to get a trailer. Let's go camping. Let's tour the United States. But then nobody plans for something for sure that is going to happen to all of us.
Yes, I don't think what's going on in the world today just emphasizes what I do, because we just don't know. You talked about the pandemic, the COVID-19. You talked about the August 3rd tragedy. I'll never forget it. It's my granddaughter's birthday, August 3rd. Kobe Bryant, when that great superstar passed away, and his daughter and the family, the other members of that tragic helicopter crash, I'll never forget, that was on a Sunday. I'll never forget on Monday morning when I was listening to one of the sports shows on the radio, Jerry West, the great basketball Hall of Famer, was talking to the host, and he was very close to Kobe, and he said, you know, today we are living a wonderful life. God's given us this wonderful day, but tomorrow is never promised. And on Saturday, Kobe was living the dream and his family, and on Sunday he was gone. And this can happen to any one of us. I had one sibling, I had one sister, lived in New York. She was down here in May for my son Jeffrey's graduation from Cathedral. This was back in 2001. And in September, she was gone. She had stage 4 breast cancer that was not detected. And at age 47, I went up to New York and eulogized her, and we were extremely close, and she was gone. And we just don't know. And you touched on it. And I think it's one of the things that I would like to eliminate some of your fears, and some of the people out there listening. You buy car insurance. You may never need it.
Yeah.
Price will go up. I'm sorry for all you insurance agents out there, but it does happen. It's a sad state of affairs. Health insurance, the monumental rise in the cost of health insurance, it's staggering. So much so that we had to have the different care systems that are in place now. Homeowners insurance. All of these things you don't have any trouble thinking about writing a check for and paying on a monthly basis, something that you'll never use, something that you may use. But this is something that you know you will use. And if you do it ahead of time, and the younger you are, the less expensive it is. That is a wonderful business decision,
right,
and a family decision to make.
Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about the cost, because it's something I don't know anything about it. I don't know how much a casket costs. I hear people talk on movies or something like that. The funeral costs so much, this and that, and it seems like a whole bunch, but I just don't know what I don't know. I don't know any costs for any funeral arrangement.
A pre-arrangement contract covers any type of funeral that's desired, whether it's the most simple direct cremation or the most expensive elaborate funeral with a casket there is. When I talk to people that have identified their need as a traditional with a casket, then I tell them a lot of these things are pretty cut and dried. What's going to drive the cost one way or the other is the expense of the casket. Now, there are many people that say it's going into the ground. What difference does it make? Give me the least expensive casket there is. Well, that's okay. That runs with us about $1,400. You can also get a casket that costs $20,000.
Wow.
And everything in between. So if you buy the $20,000 casket, next week you're not going to see me at B&I because I'm going to be on the beach in Hawaii with my commission.
Right.
I've never sold one of those. But it's everything in between. So there are so many things to think about, but the younger you are, the less expensive it can be. And here's the reason why. The insurance companies that write the contract, many of you out there know, I'm sure you know as well, Thomas, because your industry is intertwined. The insurance industry makes their money by investing your premium dollars. Mm-hmm. That's how they do it. And it's an actuarial table on how they can invest. So you are how old?
I'm 40 years old.
You're 40 years old. If you and I buy the exact same plan, the insurance company can invest more of your money that you pay, because statistically,
perception,
actuarially, you are gonna live longer than I am.
Right.
So they have to keep in reserve more of my money because they're not allowed to invest it because of my, I'm supposed to live 16.5 more years.
Yeah.
You're supposed
your
to live.
accelerated condition on the planet.
Yeah, so that's what it is. Now, I've written a 13-year-old and
Right.
I've written a 106-year-old and everybody in between. But when you write a pre-arrangement contract, let me also answer a question that I know is out there. When you make monthly payments, which you can do, now the best way is to pay for it in full.
Right.
But if you make monthly payments, like my wife and I had to when we bought ours 8 years ago, because we didn't have the money to pay for it in full, there is no interest. There's not a penny's worth of interest on that. Now, you can add an insurance rider, if you will, that will protect you in case you die prematurely, that if you do, then the insurance company pays off the entire amount for your family.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that my wife and I bought ours 8 years ago. The exact stuff that we bought, because we do a traditional burial, have gone up about 17%. So that just tells you how much it's going to go up.
Yeah.
So you can buy it, you can make monthly payments, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. You can prepay it if you want. Many people come in here and accelerate the payments and get that done quickly. No interest, no charge for doing that. Very important to know. And the other thing that I know that many people have this fear, and I know in chatting with you, you have this fear. You mentioned it about coming over. And just, if I buy this contract, is something gonna happen to me? I mean, I know that's out there.
Yeah.
But just think about this. What is, if pre-arrangement wasn't there, what is the next way? How do you think most people purchase or pay for a funeral if there wasn't pre-arrangement?
Well, it's cash right there. I mean,
Cash or life insurance?
right.
I mean, many people, and one of the biggest objections I get is, I've got life insurance. Why do I need another insurance type contract?
Sure.
Why do I just don't want to deal with this? Well, how many millions and millions of people out there have life insurance? When they bought life insurance, they didn't die the next day.
Right.
When you buy your car insurance off the lot, when you're driving your new car, you didn't get into a wreck.
Right.
When you buy your homeowner's insurance, you didn't have a need for a new roof immediately. All of these things that you buy carry the same stigma. It's not as great a stigma as death, but they're all things that you need to protect a bad situation.
Yeah.
And they don't come the second you sign the contract.
Right.
And believe me, I've been doing this for 8 years, Thomas, and I can tell you one thing. I've never had a client that walked out of here and died the next day or any time in the next few days. It just doesn't happen.
Right. Right.
You just have to get over that fear.
Yeah.
It's a sound financial purchase and a sound family purchase.
Let me ask you this. So I'm convinced that I have to do something for me and for my family. So an arrangement for myself, my wife, my 3 kids. And I don't know what all of that is yet, but just talking to you, and this is the second time that we've really had some conversation about this, and I went home and I talked to my wife, and so we started having these conversations. It really made us be adults. So let's say whatever the cost is or anything, and I get into a pre-arrangement, we sign, and I'm making my monthly payments. And I don't know how long that lasts, but what if I die and I'm still making payments?
Well, there's 2 ways, Thomas, that you can, 3 ways. There's 3 ways that you can pay for a pre-arrangement contract. Number 1, like I told you, you write a check for the full amount.
Sure.
Then it's covered, no matter what happens. The second 2 ways that are on monthly payments, and that is determined by the thought process of the individual like yourself and the financial situation of that person. You can do what is called a dollar for dollar contract. So let's say for the sake of discussion, that your pre-arrangement contract is going to be $6,000.
Okay.
You want a traditional burial, not a very fancy casket, but after the BNI discount, which was probably all that you bought was about 8,000 and change,
Mm-hmm.
but the discount I can give you is so substantial that, let's say it's around $6,000. You can pay $600 up front, down payment, 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And then you make monthly payments thereafter in equal installments. If you want it for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever is most convenient for your budget.
Right.
Every monthly payment that you make, plus the $600 down payment, credits you for your final expense. If you were to pass away before you finish paying it, the family just has to pay the difference at the time of death.
Okay.
No interest, nothing. They just have to pay the balance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the third way is a more conservative way, but it costs a little bit more money, is to get an insured plan. And what that means is you don't have to put down the 10%, you just make the first monthly payment. But there's an insurance component based on age that is added onto it, higher premium, that if God forbid you passed away before the payments were finished, the insurance component would pay for it for you.
So that would be completely covered.
Completely covered. And I can give a bigger discount on an insured plan because they get to use more of your money
Right.
on an insured plan than the dollar for dollar, because they don't get to use that money. That's just a quirk within their system. They don't get to use it when it's not an insured product. And
Okay.
everybody's situation is different.
Sure.
And, but that's the way you handle it.
Right. So, tell us, how do we get in contact with you? So there's a lot of people seeing it, and obviously I came here, I had to ask even before, is Sunset Funeral Homes open? What are the locations? Where do I go? Who do I call? What do I do?
Sunset Funeral Homes is locally owned. I'm glad you brought that up because it gives me a chance to talk about Sunset. Sunset is locally owned. The Ramos family here owns Sunset. They have 4 locations. North Loop, McRae off of Carolina,
Okay.
Hondo Pass in the northeast, and here at Wrestler on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
You can use any one of those 4 locations. So that tells you, like I said, locally owned.
Mm-hmm.
Our prices are generally better than our nearest competition up the road, and they do a wonderful job, but they're not locally owned anymore. When I was growing up the street, Martin, they were the biggest and the best. They still are great, but they're not locally owned, and their prices are significantly higher.
Right.
The other part of your question, I apologize.
How do they get in contact?
Get in contact with me, my phone number, 915-203-7315. I live right up the street from Sunset. I can meet anybody here. Sunset is open until 4 o'clock most days and on the weekends. So I can meet people at their homes.
Mm-hmm.
I do that all the time. I work weekends, I work evenings. I understand we have to do this protocol with the
Right,
mask,
sure.
but we cover all those bases.
Mm-hmm.
So here at their home, if they're more convenient doing that,
Let me get the phone number one more time so I can write it in here.
915-203-7315.
203 7315. 915-203-7315.
Right, and I just make this pledge to everybody out there. My initial appointments are educational. I am not walking in with the contract. My contracts are in the car. If a family feels like they want to do something, we do it. And on page 3 of the contract is a little 2-sentence blurb that is what is called a free look. And that's with this contract as well as any life insurance contract that you might buy. This gives the individual or family some comfort in writing a contract, in that if in the first 30 days, if they don't like the contract, they get all their money back. So there's no risk in starting a plan.
Right.
And another thing that's very important, we hope it doesn't happen to anybody, But in this day and age, you never can tell, or with regular circumstances, who knows what happens in the world. If after paying for it for a certain amount of time, you just can't do it anymore, something happened to the business, something happened in family matters, there's a surrender value. The contract builds cash value just like a life insurance policy.
Okay.
And so a person isn't left high and dry and say after 3 years of making payments into a 5-year plan, they can't do it anymore. The entire amount of money they put in is not lost. There's a significant amount of the cash value that they put in that they can get. We hope that that doesn't happen,
Sure.
but it does happen in,
Right.
in certain situations.
Okay. Wow. Man, so breaking down that barrier to have a conversation with you about these types of things, it's tough for me. I had anxiety coming here. I told you before we got on that when I got off the highway and I'm on Wrestler and it said 1 mile ahead you will arrive at Sunset Funeral Homes, and I feel like my heart stopped for a second. I was like, oh wow, what if that was happening? I'm not alive, right? And that's my location. That's where I'm going. But I don't have a plan. I'm driving here. I don't have a plan. What if I'm coming here and I'm dead, and I don't have a plan? And that, it really bothered me. And I'm glad we were able to have this conversation organically. There was nothing really prepared for this. We had a conversation, Monday? And we're like, hey, let's do something. And let's get together and let's have this conversation live so people can benefit from it. And I hope that this was value to everybody out there that sees the video. It's definitely value to me. We have to start having these conversations and just get over the fact that we think we're invincible, and start having some real adult conversations and planning things so that way when you do pass away, that everything is covered, and all we have to do is the flip side. It's just tell you date and time, and let me go back and tend to my family that will be coming in and get the support and nurture that we need during those times.
Let me tell you one last thing, Thomas, and I think it's very important to be proactive. It's one thing to absorb this information and to say, you know what, I think that's a good idea, but I'm 40 years old and I got plenty of time. Well, two things. Number one, we don't know how much time you have. And number two, I'm 68 years old. And I don't know how much time I have, and I don't know how much time I'll be in BNI. I'm the oldest member in there. But because of your involvement in BNI, and because of your involvement in this Facebook Live, the people that are watching right now, you, your family, your referrals are going to get that wonderful discount from me as well. And if I'm not around, you're not getting that discount. So be proactive. There is no time better than right now to do this. It's a gift. It's a tie that's not going to be thrown in your closet. It's a toy that's not going to be broken one day after Christmas. It's the most loving gift you can give that will last forever.
Right.
Your family will thank you for it forever.
Mm-hmm. So if you're watching this and you want to pick up the phone and you call Allen, you tell him you saw this video and that you're interested in having that conversation. He said he comes from an education standpoint first, and really that's the start of it all. Have the conversation, get the education, and then make a decision so that you're not having to do it when a tragedy happens and you're surrounded by all the emotions of a loved one passing, and then having to decide all of this stuff up here, and I don't know what I want, and what does everybody else get, and what color is the casket? Am I supposed to care about that? I don't want to worry about those types of things, when that tragic day comes. So again, I hope you had value from this. You know how to get in touch with him. I'll put comments, and we'll share the information on this post and on our Facebook pages and things like that. So you know how to do it. Just get off your butt and do the right thing.
Thanks, Thomas.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Take care, guys. We'll see you around.